So what was it like for a typical day as a photopass photographer at Disney World? Most of the time when I worked at Disney World, I was at Magic Kingdom, although I spent a lot of time at Epcot and Hollywood Studios as well. With all of them, of course, your day would start off parking your car in the employee parking lot and then heading over to the security station. At Epcot and Hollywood Studios, this was part of a big, huge building, but at Magic Kingdom, it was kind of off in its own little area. You'd go over to the bus stop and security would be there, and the first thing they do is they check your ID card, make sure that you were actually still a legitimate employee, not somebody trying to sneak in. Then they take a look at your lunch and anything else that you were bringing in. Once security was satisfied you're okay, then they'd wave you on, and once the bus got there, you'd hop on the bus then and take the bus through another security checkpoint for delivery vehicles, and then head over to the entrance to the utilidors. At that point, you get off the bus and you begin to walk into the park. And at Magic Kingdom, I've already talked a little bit about the utilidors, but your main entrance was kind of through this big, huge open entry. You'd walk in and past the employee cafeteria that was right there. Costuming was on one side. The Disney Learning Center would be just past it a little bit, where they'd have the books that you could check out and the movies and the computers. And I've heard they've gotten rid of some of that since then. I would then walk down the hall to kind of a dead end where it would tee and walk to the left and then around the character zoo and down underneath the castle. Usually wave at the people who were working at Cinderella's Royal Table because the photography station was right over there on the side. Head down, go underneath the moat, come back up the other end, and at that point we're pretty much underneath Main Street. Again, make a quick little left, skip the whole loop around the park, make another quick right, and our base was right there on the right side. That's where we would check in and get everything ready. The neat thing about our base location was the Main Street break room was actually just down the hall a little bit from us, so it wasn't that far to the break room, which made it kind of nice. We'd head on in, check the time, make sure that we knew what time we were coming in. We could clock in 15 minutes before our shift was supposed to schedule, and that was usually a good idea because you didn't want to be late. We might start getting our gear ready, getting extra photo passes loaded up into our pockets, trying to get everything all set so that we were ready for the day, extra batteries. Depending upon what was happening and if we knew where we were going early, which some of us did, we may start to get our gear and camera equipment. Otherwise, we waited until after we had our pre-meeting. And that was where our manager sat down with us and said, here's what's going on for the day. They'd tell us about any news, any events in the parks, if they may be doing some filming in the park, or if there was something else that we need to know. If, say, we had the Blue Angels or Thunderbirds flying over, or there was some star that was going to be in the park that day for an event, or any of a number of other things. If there was a new special going on too, we may get told about that. And it was a nice orientation for the day. Once that meeting was done, then we would start to clock in, and the computer would then get our assignments and give them to us. That was a little bit of a different change from when I started. When I very first started, our coordinators actually assigned everybody to positions, and you would pretty much stay at one position all day. If you were working with a character, you would be with that character for almost the whole day. Eventually, though, they decided they didn't want the coordinators doing all that. They'd rather have the computer doing it, which it did for most other departments, and so we shifted over to that. It had its pluses and minuses. I kind of liked being in one spot all day, but we got used to it. The computer would then assign us our position, and if we hadn't gotten our gear already, at that point we would turn around and we would get our camera and our PDAs and the flash units and the batteries and get all of that checked out and ready to go because it was all assigned to specific places and locations at that point. We'd then head on out and get ready to go. If we were out on Main Street, we make sure we get our position in the street and get ready to start waving and greeting everybody as they came into the park. Maybe we'd be opening up Expo Hall with our view stations, in which case we'd head on up to Expo Hall and we'd turn on all the computers and all the printers and make sure that everything was ready to go there and ready to greet guests. And if we had no guests at that point, which we usually didn't, then we kind of head out the front door and wave to everybody as they were coming in. If we were with a character, then we would head over to that character's break room because most characters have kind of an assigned spot where they get ready for the day and get prepared before they head out to meet the guests. We would check in with the characters at that point, let them know, hi, I'm your opening photographer. I'm going to be working with you for a little bit. Go over things with them if there was anything we needed to know. This is where it was nice on the days when we stayed with a character all day because we could kind of cover everything in the meeting, say, hi, how are you doing? And then we would get into a routine, and it made it for a great day. With the computer, we didn't get to stay there all day with them. It would shift us out after a little while. And so it made it a little more awkward. Didn't get to know the characters quite as well as we had used to. But at the same time, there were a lot of other things that did add in efficiency. Once the characters were ready to go, we would head on out with the characters to their location, and we worked with the character attendants to help make sure that the lines ran smooth, that the guests all had their questions answered, they got their photopass cards and got good pictures, and be able to work with them. After we'd been in our location for a little while, we would have a second wave of photographers that would come in called breakers. They'd come in a couple hours after everybody else had started, and when they clocked in, they didn't necessarily get a full set of gear, although they would get photo passes and batteries, and the computer would actually assign them to go out and break somebody else. It'd print off a little stub and it would say, go break so-and-so at this location, tell them to take a break until such and such time. And so as you're out on the street working, this other photographer would come up, they'd hand you the slip letting you know that you're getting bumped out for a break. You would then take your camera, unclip it from your camera strap, hand it to them, they would clip it onto theirs, hand the PDA over to them, and make sure that they were all set to go, that they had everything signed in. And then you take your slip and you would head off to your break. Again, depending upon where you were, there were break rooms all over the different parks. Many of the break rooms you'd walk in and they would be just a few benches, a few vending machines maybe, a TV up in the wall on one corner that you could watch, a couple microwaves, and just a little bit of place to get some peace and quiet. If you were able to break at the character break rooms, especially at Epcot we would do this, because at Epcot we still got stationed with the characters all day. We just break with the characters, and then there would be a couple couches in there and a little kitchenette and a fridge that you could keep your lunch in. Generally speaking, we didn't keep our lunches in the public break rooms because anybody and everybody could get to those, and I didn't trust people. We could leave them in our bases, though, which would have a fridge. Or if we were with characters, or a place where we had a little more private break room, we'd use the fridges. Some of the break rooms, like the one on the end of Main Street, would actually have a little snack bar area in it, which might have some hot and cold things in it, like hot dogs and ice cream. Ice cream on a hot day was wonderful. Great place to be for that. And we'd enjoy our breaks. The other option for a break room was to head over to the cafeteria. Every park had a main employee cafeteria. And in that place, you could go in and they would have a hot dish of the day. It may be sandwiches, it may be roast beef, it may be turkey, it could be chicken over rice, or a number of other different things. They'd often have like a pizza bar, a hamburger grill and fries that was in there. You could special order food. You could also go to the Subway that was part of it. Have them make you a sandwich up for it, pay, and then you have a large dining area. And that's kind of where we would congregate as groups and enjoy and talk about the stories of the day and what was going on. Once your break was over, if you weren't stationed with a character at Epcot, you'd head back over to the computer station. Most break rooms had one. Clock back in again and find out where it was going to send you. It'd print off a little slip and tell you to go break so-and-so at such and such location. You'd head on up to that place and bump them out for their break. Typically, you'd get a break about every 3 hours or so if you were on the computer system. If you're stationed with a character, you'd usually take a break when they took a big break. So you'd have lunch with them or dinner, and you kind of follow their schedule for the most part. 3 hours, though, was typically the norm before you would get a break, and then you would get a 15-minute or a half-hour-long break, depending upon how long you were working that day. Back in the days when the coordinators ran it, and even sometimes when the coordinators would override the systems, it didn't always quite happen sometimes. We had a couple coordinators that weren't quite so good about keeping on top of the breaks, and so we did have kind of an unwritten rule that if it had been 4 hours since you'd had your break, or if you were 20 minutes late to get off of work, then you could step off stage and give a call or check in and say, hey, did you forget about me? What's going on? It didn't happen very often, but there was one coordinator at Magic Kingdom that tended to do that to me quite often, especially when I was stationed over at Epcot and I would pick up shifts. If I was picking up a shift at Magic Kingdom at that point, I would actually call my friends who worked over there and say, hey, is this coordinator working on this day? Because if they are, I'm not going in. Because she was terrible about forgetting about me. I had a couple times where I had to just plain walk off stage and back to base and go, hello, I'm here. Did you forget again? Oh, whoops. Thankfully, that was rare, and it was really just one coordinator that did it. So walking off stage was not a normal thing. Now, if you're in the park when evening arrived and you're shooting out on the streets with the icons, such as the castle or Spaceship Earth, then you would go get your tripods. Depending upon the park, they might bring the tripod to you to set up on, or you may have to step off, go back to base and pick it up and bring it back out. That's where we got those gorgeous night shots. We had a whole setup arrangement with certain settings that we'd use on the camera just for it, to make sure the castle was lit up real pretty, to make sure you could see Spaceship Earth or the giant hat when it was still at studios. And then you'd set up in the street and get these wonderful pictures of people. Quick trick, if you're going to take a night shot on your camera, you may notice you get a lot of blurry pictures. It's because you don't have a tripod, and it's because you're not holding still long enough. Night pictures take a little bit of time. And so we would learn to get people to stand still, how to make them stay there for 5 to 10 seconds to make sure that we got a nice clear picture. And you may do something kind of silly behind the camera to help keep them entertained. And don't move, don't move, don't move, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Okay, now you can move. And that way they would know when it was safe to actually move, and you get a good picture of them that way. We learned all sorts of different tricks to get people to smile and be happy for the pictures. It may be funny noises, it may be weird faces, it may be playing with other photographers. But we always worked hard to make sure that we got good smiles out of the guests, because that gave them a good picture and a great memory. We also wouldn't hesitate to use guest cameras too. In fact, if we saw a guest taking a picture of the rest of their family, we'd go over, grab the camera from them, say, hey, go in there, get in with the picture so that way we can get you. And we'd use their camera, and that way they weren't left out. One of the biggest things for us while we're out on the streets is, how can we be of service to the guests? And that's what we looked for. If they're looking at a map, we'd step over to help give them directions. If they're looking at a Times Guide, we'd try to explain when things were and what was there. If they were looking confused, we'd go over and answer any question we could. What could we do to help? Because that's what we were there for. That was the big part of our job. Once your shift was finally over, maybe you'd have somebody that would come bump you out and they give you a slip that say time to go clock out. Or maybe you knew about what time you were supposed to be off and you knew you were the last person there. You'd pack up your stuff and you'd head back towards base. If you got bumped out, well, you'd leave the camera and other gear behind, but otherwise you brought it back with you, headed back down, turn the camera in, turn the batteries in, let them know what you used, unload any extra photo passes still in your pocket, and then you'd get all ready to go home. Clock out, grab your stuff, check back in the security on your way out, because now they were checking to make sure you weren't taking something you shouldn't. Hop back on the bus if you're at Magic Kingdom, or get out to the parking lot and head on home, and be prepared about 8 hours later to do it all over again. It was a lot of fun, though. We had a great time doing it. It was one of the few jobs I've had where you looked forward to work every day because you knew it was going to be a good time. So that's a little look at what a standard day in the life of a photopass photographer at Disney was. Some ways not much different than other jobs, but in many ways, hey, it was very magical. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.